Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Kitab al-Birr wa Sila wal Adaab, and we are moving on to the next chapter about the prohibition of ghiba, backbiting. From Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, Atadruna mal ghiba, do you people know what ghiba is? They said, Allahu wa Rasuluhu a'lam, Allah and His Messenger know better. And the Prophet replied, Dhikruka akhaka bima yakrah, mentioning your brother with that which he hates to be mentioned. It was said, Afara'ayta in kana fi akhi ma aqul, inform me if what I'm saying about my brother is actually true. The Prophet said, إن كان فيه ما تقول فقد اغتبته وإن لم يكن فيه فقد بهته. If it is true what you're saying about your brother, then you have backbit him. But if it is not true, then you have slandered him. We mentioned before the difference between sab and ghiba. With sab, he's in front of you. With ghiba, he's not in front of you. Ghiba is a major sin, because Allah Jalla wa Ala likens it to eating the dead meat of your brother. And eating the dead meat of even animals is haram enough. So how about eating the dead meat of a human being, who is even more sacrosanct? So mentioning anything which he hates, this could be about his physical features, it could be something pertaining to his character. So you could say, oh, he has a big nose. Or perhaps you could say, he is not chaste, he looks at other women, and so on. These are qualities which somebody does not want to be mentioned about him, even if they may be true. It could be something about his character, about his physical appearance, even about his deen, maybe saying, oh, he is a mubtadi', or he does not pray, or he commits such and such a violation of the deen. So character assassinating him in this way is also from ghiba. If you have lied about him behind his back, then the Prophet said that this is buhtan, which we translate to slander. Well, it is ghiba and buhtan. It is both, but the Prophet is just making a differentiation here. But just because it is slander does not mean it is also not backbiting. Similarly, where the Prophet said, would that we could see our brothers. And the Sahaba said, are we not your brothers? And the Prophet said, La antum ashabi wa ikhwanuna humul ladhina ya'tuna min ba'di. No, you are my companions, he told them. But our brothers are those who will come after me. That is to say, they will come after the Prophet. They have not seen the Prophet, yet they will have iman in him. But this hadith found in Sahih Muslim, does this mean that the Sahaba are not the Prophet's brothers? No, of course they are. They are the Prophet's brothers, no doubt about that. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. But the Prophet is saying that the brothers will be the ones who come after him, have not seen him. As for the Sahaba, they are the Sahaba and they are brothers. But being a Sahabi is higher than just being a brother. That's why he said, you are my Sahaba. He gave them a higher status. Otherwise, they are brothers as well. There's no doubt about that. They are the Prophet's brothers. It should also be borne in mind that the severity of backbiting also depends on the one you're backbiting. Backbiting a normal person, an ammi, means you are doing evil to him. But backbiting a scholar or a ruler means you're doing much more. Not only are you doing evil to him on a personal level, but also what they are responsible for. So for a scholar, he is responsible for carrying the Sharia. You backbite him, you are backbiting him personally, but also you are doing evil to the knowledge which he's carrying, because if you backbite him and his status is lowered in the eyes of the people, they will not accept his statements and his knowledge. Or for example, a ruler, they will try to perhaps rebel against him or not obey him, thereby belittling the authority. And this is all impermissible in the Sharia. Belittling knowledge of the Sharia and belittling the authority of the Muslim ruler, these are not trivial matters. This is the type of thing which leads to anarchy in the land, and uprising and revolt, which leads to disunity and inevitably bloodshed. Many might try to argue that they are warning against the evil. Well, we say no, warning against the evil needs to be done properly. Warning about mistakes of scholars and rulers in a character assassination form is not forbidding the evil, because you are not undertaking this task in the proper manner. Rather, this action of backbiting and advertising the faults of rulers and scholars is just going to create more disunity and more hatred and sectarianism. And these people will not mention anything good about those whom they are targeting, because their hatred makes them avoid justice. But Allah Jalla wa Ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kunu qawwamina lillahi shuhada'a bil qist. ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى. O mu'minun, stand as just witnesses for Allah, and do not let your hatred make you avoid justice. Rather be just, that is closer to taqwa. This is where justice really comes into its own. When you hate somebody, can you be just to that person? It's easy to be just to those whom you love, but are you going to be just to those whom you hate? Whenever someone speaks the truth, then you give him credit for that. As for if they say something which is wrong and you have evidence for it, then you refute the wrong ideas, but there is no need for character assassination, no need for backbiting. Allah Jalla wa Ala Himself accepts the truth from the mushrikeen, even the worst of all type of people. وَإِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً قَالُوا وَجَدْنَا عَلَيْهَا آبَاءَنَا وَاللَّهُ أَمَرَنَا بِهَا قُلْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لا يأمر بالفحشاء أتقولون على الله ما لا تعلمون. When they do fahisha, that is making tawaf naked around the Kaaba, they say, we found our fathers doing this, so we are practicing the same thing, and also Allah ordered us to do it. Say, Allah does not order shameless acts. Do you speak against Allah that which you know not? So they mentioned two reasons. Allah only refuted the second reason, which is that Allah ordered them. He accepted from them the first reason, that they found their fathers doing it. So He accepted the truth from them, which is why He did not refute it. And when Allah remains quiet about a statement, it means it is true. Because otherwise, if it was false, and we are talking about a declarative statement here, if it was false, then Allah Jalla wa Ala must point it out and make right what is wrong. The Sahaba replied, Allah and the Messenger know better. In matters of the deen, one is allowed to say Allah and the Messenger know better, but in universal affairs, that is non-deeni affairs, you just say Allah knows better or Allah knows best. If somebody asks you, how far away is the sun from the earth? Here, if you do not know the answer, you say Allah knows best. You would not say Allah and the Messenger know best. So it is mentioning something about your brother which he hates to be said about him. This word brother would mean a Muslim. But we could understand this to be most commonly the case. Otherwise, a dhimmi, his honor is also protected. So there are certain non-Muslims whose honor is protected because they are protected by the state. We learn from this hadith a good teaching technique: ask people questions to get their thinking aroused, because then they'll be in a better position to accept and receive the knowledge. We learn that if you have no knowledge, then say, I do not know, rather than speaking against Allah that which is not correct. And it is a sign of knowledge that a person says, I do not know. Is it permissible to say Allah and Fulan know better, where Fulan, let's say, is a great scholar? The answer is no, that is not permissible. Allah and the Messenger know best can be said about Shar'i matters, but Allah and Shaykh Fulan know best cannot be said, because Shaykh Fulan is not a legislator, whereas the Prophet is. He speaks on behalf of Allah, whereas any scholar does not speak on behalf of Allah Jalla wa Ala about matters of the Sharia. Allah and the Messenger know better. Can this be said after the death of the Prophet? Here there is a difference of opinion. Some say yes, and other scholars say no. It appears to us, however, that the Prophet is definitely more knowledgeable about the Sharia than us. Therefore, if one utters this sentence even after the Prophet's death, then hopefully there is nothing wrong with that. We also take from the hadith that the Prophet chooses a word which incites the emotion, because he says, mentioning your brother with that which he hates. So your brother is a more emotional word, because nobody would want to speak about his brother that which he hates. Similar to how Allah Jalla wa Ala says, مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا غَوَى. Your companion is not lost nor gone astray. So it incites the emotion a lot more. As if you know that he's your companion, you will show more tenderness and love towards him. Also, pay attention to when the Prophet says, mentioning him with that which he hates. It needs to be that which he himself personally hates, because it may be that which he hates, others would not hate. For example, saying, Fulan is an old man. Many people may not hate that somebody else says about them, old man, but maybe the person you are speaking about would hate it. So in that case, you need to look at his personal taste, not the taste of others. You may find with some hadith scholars, they mention certain narrators, and these narrators are known as, let's say, al-a'raj, somebody who has a limp, cannot walk properly, or al-a'ma, somebody who's blind, or al-ahwal, somebody who has a squint in his eyes, so his eyes are not aligned properly. These are qualities which somebody does not want to be mentioned about them. So would this be backbiting then from the scholars of hadith when they mention the particular narrator of the hadith? Well, the answer here is that it's a case of necessity. You absolutely have to mention this quality because otherwise the narrator would not be known. So in a case like this, the maslaha of calling them these names outweighs the mafsada. We also find that the Prophet was able to take questions because he was asked, what if what I say about my brother is actually true? So this questioner is delving into the matter. And so you're allowed to ask questions in order to seek clarification on the ruling. And such questioners should not be rebuked, rather their question answered, unless you know that the questioner is trying to make life difficult for you gratuitously, in which case you are not obliged to answer. Allah says to the Prophet about the Yahud asking him questions, فَإِنْ جَاءُوكَ فَاحْكُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ أَوْ أَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ. If they come to you, then either you judge between them or you can turn away from them. Because often the Yahud would ask questions not genuinely seeking inquiry, but rather to put the Prophet in a difficult situation. Note there is another sin called namima, which is when you say things to incite enmity between the people. And about that the Prophet said, لا يدخل الجنة قتات, meaning to say namam, the one who spreads namima. And so ghiba and namima are both major sins. Some scholars said about the backbiting that if you backbite, then meat of your brother will be brought to you on Yawm al-Qiyamah and you will be forced to eat it. It is similar to how the one who makes an image will be forced to breathe life into that image. Or how the Prophet said, مَنْ تَحَلَّمَ بِحُلْمٍ لَمْ يَرَهُ كُلِّفَ أَنْ يَعْقِدَ بَيْنَ شَعِيرَتَيْنِ وَلَنْ يَفْعَلْ. Whoever claims to see a dream which he did not in fact see, then on Yawm al-Qiyamah he will be brought 2 grains of barley and he will be ordered to tie a knot between them. And he will not be able to do so. And that's obvious enough. You cannot tie a knot between 2 grains of barley. So he will be kept on being punished until he can tie that knot. And of course, he will not be able to tie the knot. So it will be a stressful humiliation for him. Let's take the next chapter about Allah concealing the faults of the servant in this world and the hereafter. From Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, لا يستر الله على عبد في الدنيا إلا ستره الله يوم القيامة. The servant whose faults Allah has concealed in this world, then Allah will also conceal his faults in the hereafter. So everyone commits sins, that is true, but not everyone's sins are concealed. If you commit sins, you must conceal your sins, and do not openly brag about them, as we find some Muslims doing. So if Allah Jalla wa Ala conceals your sins in this world, then they will also be concealed in the hereafter. That is to say, you will not be shamed in front of everyone because of the particular sins that you used to commit. As in, for example, every treacherous person will have a flag raised for him, and it will be said, this is the treachery of Fulan and Fulan. Your name will be mentioned, and everyone will be able to see that you are a traitor. So you can imagine the type of humiliation. The next chapter, showing kindness to the person who is ill-mannered. From Aisha, she says that a man sought permission to see the Prophet. The Prophet says to Aisha, إِذَنُوا لَهُ فَلَبِئْسَ بْنُ الْعَشِيرَةِ. Give him permission, for he is a bad son of his tribe, meaning he is an evil member of his tribe. Yet when this man entered, the Prophet spoke to him with kind words. And then afterwards Aisha asked him, you said about him what you said, but then afterwards you spoke soft and kind words to him? To which the Prophet replied, Ya Aisha, Inna sharra nasi manzilatan inda Allahi yawm al-qiyamah man wada'ahu aw tarakahu nasu ittiqa'a fuhshih. O Aisha, the worst person in status with Allah on Yawm al-Qiyamah is the type of person whom other people leave off because of his extreme indecency. Some scholars use this narration to make some exceptions from ghiba or backbiting, because here the Prophet certainly spoke something negative about this man. He said, فَلَبِئْسَ بْنُ الْعَشِيرَةِ. a bad person or son of his tribe. It seems to us then that this man was a man of corruption and misguidance. And so we say you're allowed to backbite against a person who is of evil so as to warn people away from his evil, so that they will not be duped by him and fall into his plots and plans. Similar to this is the narration found in Sahih al-Bukhari where the Prophet said to Aisha, مَا أَظُنُّ أَنَّ فُلَانًا وَفُلَانًا يَعْرِفَانِ مِنْ دِينِنَا شَيْئًا. I do not think that Fulan and Fulan know anything about our deen. So again, this could be seen to be backbiting. But if they were munafiqun, which it appears to be the case, then that would be okay to warn people that this is a person of nifaq. Likewise, we have the hadith of Fatima bint Qais, where 3 men proposed to her. One was Muawiyah. The Prophet said, أَمَّا مُعَاوِيَةٌ فَصُعْلُوكٌ لَا مَالَ لَهُ. Muawiyah is poor, he has no wealth. Another one was Abu Jahm. The Prophet said, أَمَّا أَبُو جَهَمْ فَلَا يَضَعُ عَصَاهُ عَنْ عَاتِقِهِ. This man does not take his stick off his shoulders, meaning to say, he beats his wives. And the other one was Usama ibn Zayd, and the Prophet told Fatima bint Qais to marry Usama ibn Zayd. So to give a nasiha to a person about another person, then his bad qualities can be mentioned, as we find the Prophet doing to Fatima bint Qais, also on 2 occasions, as we just mentioned, to Aisha. So if, for example, somebody is ripping other people off, he's a devious businessman, then you should warn others against him, so they are not duped. So this is called nasiha, as opposed to fadiha, which is when you try to character assassinate someone and to scandalize him. We also learn the vital lesson of behaving well even with evil people, just as the Prophet did here, and that the worst person in status with Allah on Yawm al-Qiyamah would be the one who used to use coarse language, foul language, vile language, and also vile actions. This type of person, whom the others feel repulsed by, he will be the worst in status on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Let us now move to the next chapter, Babu Fadl al-Rifq, the virtue of being gentle. From Jarir, that the Prophet said, Man yuhramu rifqa yuhramu al-khayr. Whoever is deprived of gentleness is deprived of goodness. Also in the chapter from Aisha, that the Prophet said, Inna Allaha rafiqun yuhibbu rifqa wa yu'ti ala rifq ma la yu'ti ala al-unf wa ma la yu'ti ala ma siwah. Verily Allah is gentle and He loves gentleness, and He rewards or gives upon gentleness what He does not give upon severity, and what He does not give upon anything other than gentleness. And the third hadith of the chapter, again from Aisha, that the Prophet said, إِنَّ الرِّفْقَ لَا يَكُونُ فِي شَيْءٍ إِلَّا زَانَهُ وَلَا يُنْزَعُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِلَّا شَانَهُ. Rifq, or gentleness, is not to be found in anything except that it beautifies it, and it is not taken out of anything except that it disfigures it. So we have found 3 hadith in this chapter, all pertaining to rifq, or gentleness. If a person is deprived of gentleness, then he is deprived of much good, even if he is a Muslim who is dedicated to much ibadah. If he is not gentle with other people, he is deprived of goodness. And you often find this amongst people who have authority over others. They are harsh with those who are underneath them. Yes, it is true, to be harsh with those under your authority when that is warranted is fine, because it is warranted. But you all too often find people who just want to stamp their authority over others and really stroke their egos and are harsh with others so as to convince themselves that they have good authority and so that they may feel powerful. It's all a matter of stroking your ego. So this type of character is not much good. And we ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to put rifq in our character. And normally when a person is severe or violent even, almost always you will find that what he does or says is going to lead to regret afterwards when he comes back to his senses. Almost always. So we do not want to be finding ourselves in a situation where we are regretting what we did. So prevention is better than cure. And the prevention here is rifq. To have rifq or gentleness as part of your character. However, going to extremes either end is no good. So if you show gentleness where punishment is warranted, for example, 2 people are caught committing zina and evidence is established on them, and you are a gentle person, you do not establish the punishment, this is not rifq, this is not gentleness, Rather, this is weakness. So you see, in this case, you're on the other end of the extreme. So both ends of the extremes are not where you want to be, because they lead to the wrong decisions being made. If you want to always make the right decisions, then you need to be in the middle. And in these narrations about the virtue of rifq, there is evidence that you can work to change your character. If you are such a person who is severe and strict, that is to say, overly strict, and deals with others harshly, then if it was not possible for you to change, then these ahadith would not really have too much value to them. What's the point in speaking about the virtue of something when you're unable to attain it? So it shows us that you are able to, and you do have the ability to change aspects of your character. Yes, it may be difficult, but it is possible, and it is worthy to be tried. We find that Allah Jalla wa Ala himself is Rafiq. He is gentle, and He loves the quality of gentleness, and He rewards those people who are gentle more than any other quality, more than violence or severity, and more than any other quality besides rifq. Let's take the next chapter about the prohibition of cursing animals and other than animals. Imran ibn Hussein reports, "We were with the Prophet on a journey. There was a woman from the Ansar riding a she-camel. The woman became annoyed and cursed the camel. The Prophet heard this and ordered, خُذُوا مَا عَلَيْهَا وَدَعُوهَا فَإِنَّهَا مَلْعُونَةٌ. Take the baggage which is on this camel and let this camel go, because it is cursed." In this hadith, we find the warning of cursing even animals. That is to say that the la'na be upon a particular animal or a particular person. And this is not one of the characteristics of the mu'min. As the Prophet said, لَيْسَ الْمُؤْمِنُ بِالطَّعَانِ وَلَا بِاللَّعَانِ وَلَا بِالْفَاحِشِ وَلَا بِالْبَذِيءِ. The mu'min is not one who scathes other people, nor one who curses others, nor one who is excessive in his speech, that is to say, ugly speech, nor one who uses vulgar language. So such type of language and words show that your iman is not what it really ought to be, that there is deficiency. So the ta'an would be making scathing remarks on his perhaps lineage, on his honor, on perhaps his physical features, and these types of affairs, much like school playground insults. And as the hadith teaches us about the la'an, about the curse, that once somebody curses others, this curse goes up to the heavens, but the doors of the heavens are closed for it. And it comes back to the earth, and the doors of the earth are closed for it. And then it goes right, and it goes left, and it does not find a way, until it returns back. Then the one who was cursed, if he is worthy of the curse, it reaches him. But if he was not worthy of the curse, it returns back to the one who issued the curse. So we find that there are some severe warnings about cursing others. In the narration, why did the woman become annoyed? It is possible because this camel was not walking as fast as she wanted to, or was not walking at all. When the Prophet heard this curse, he punished the woman by depriving her of this camel, but still saving the luggage and the wealth that was on the camel, because you do not want to waste that. And so this is a ta'zir. Also in the chapter, from Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, لا ينبغي للصديق أن يكون لعانا. It is not proper for a siddiq, for a truthful person, to be one who curses much. La'na, or curse, is when you are far removed from the mercy of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And this type of behavior or speech is not from the characters of a siddiq. A siddiq whose speech is in accordance with the truth, whose beliefs are in accordance with the truth, and whose actions are truthful, that is, in accordance with what Allah Jalla wa Ala has ordered. So somebody of this sublime character, it is not fitting for him to be one who curses. So these people, meaning the siddiq, you will not find them to be of those types who issue much curse. And issuing a curse on your fellow mu'min is one of the greatest forms of breaking brotherly ties, where just previously we learned that the mu'min to another mu'min is like a building. Parts of it reinforce the others. And likewise they are like one body. If one of them suffers, then the whole body complains of sleepless nights and fever. So after that, how can the mu'minun be cursing each other? The hadith teaches us, لَعْنُ الْمُؤْمِنِ كَقَتْلِهِ. Cursing another mu'min is like killing him. That is to say, in sin. Now we all know how severe it would be to kill another mu'min, and so cursing him is not that far off. Also in the chapter, Zayd ibn Aslam reports that Abdul Malik ibn Marwan sent some decoration to Darda. When it was night time, Abdul Malik called his servant. The servant responded late, and so Abdul Malik cursed his servant. The next morning, Darda asked Abdul Malik, "You cursed your servant when you called him?" I heard Abu Darda say that the Prophet ﷺ said, "لا يكون اللعنون شفعاء ولا شهداء يوم القيامة." Those people who curse much will not be intercessors nor witnesses on Yawm al-Qiyamah. We know that the mu'minun will be able to intercede on behalf of other mu'mineen on Yawm al-Qiyamah, but this privilege, this great honor and privilege, will not be afforded to those who cursed much as a punishment for them. As for shuhada, then we know that this ummah will stand as a witness against the other nations that their prophets and messengers have delivered the message to them. And again, this is a great honor. Not just anyone can step up to this job. And this honor will not be afforded to those who curse much. So just look at this. Even if you are a mu'min and you worship much, but if you are one who curses much as well, then you will not be afforded these two privileges on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So take heed. Also in the chapter, Abu Hurairah reports that it was said to the Prophet, "Ya Rasulullah, ud'u ala al-mushrikeen." O Messenger of Allah, make dua against the mushrikeen. And the Prophet said, "Inni lam ub'ath la'ana wa innama bu'athtu rahmah." I have not been sent as one who curses much, rather I have been sent as a mercy. Are the kuffar cursed? Yes, they are. Inna Allah la'ana al-kafirina wa a'adda lahum sa'ira. And Allah curses the kuffar and prepared the fire for them. So they are cursed, no doubt about that. However, in this narration, the Prophet is asked to make dua against them. And indeed, you can make dua against them. The Prophet did so on certain occasions. But to do so just here and there, over no particular reason, and just making a habit of doing so, is not a quality you want to inculcate in yourself. Rather, you want to rise above it, just as the Prophet did here. He refused to make dua against the kuffar because he has been sent as a mercy, not one who will curse and condemn people to Jahannam, because that's something negative. Yes, in its proper time and place it can be warranted, as the Prophet, for example, made dua against certain tribes during the tragedy of Birr when 70 of the reciters were killed in an act of treachery. So he made dua al-qunut against them for 1 month. And likewise against Abu Jahl when he ordered that the intestines of a camel be dropped on the Prophet when he was making the sajda. So yes, there are certain occasions where you make severe dua against them, that is true. However, just doing it here and there as if it was nothing, just making it a habit, that is what you need to rise above, as we find in this hadith. And rather you need to be positive in nature, make dua for the kuffar, for their guidance. This is positive, rather than being dreary and negative. Let's take this next chapter about the one whom the Prophet curses or abuses or makes dua against unjustly. And this is a purification for that person and a reward and a mercy. Aisha reports that 2 men visited the Prophet. They spoke about something, which Aisha says she was not sure about what they were speaking. And it annoyed the Prophet, and he reviled these 2 men. When the 2 men left, I said, "O Messenger of Allah, the good would reach everyone, but it would not reach these 2 men." And the Prophet asked, "Why is that?" She says, "Because you cursed them and reviled them." To which the Prophet replied, "Awama alimti ma sha'arattu alayhi Rabbi?" Did you not know the condition which I have made with my Rabb? Qultu Allahumma innama ana bashar, فأي المسلمين لعنته أو سببته فاجعله له زكاة وأجرا. O Allah, I am only a man, so anyone from the Muslimin whom I have cursed or reviled, then let that be a means of purification for him and a reward. We learn from this hadith that the Prophet is a human and can make mistakes, so he could abuse someone or curse them where they are not deserving of it. And this is because the Prophet is a human being. He is not an angel who never makes a mistake. But if that were to happen, then there are glad tidings for the recipient in that this would be a means of a reward for him and a purification. We find also that the Prophet does not always speak from wahi. Rather, he can speak some words and sentences which are not from the revelation, such as in a case where he may revile someone or curse them where they are not worthy of it. But Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَلَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He says in the Quran that it is a revelation revealed to him. He does not speak from his own desires. And the way we would understand that ayah is that whenever the Prophet speaks about the Sharia specifically, then that is not from his desire. It is a revelation. It could also be that he makes an ijtihad from his own self about a Shari'i matter, in which case if it is correct, Allah will keep quiet about it, but if it is wrong, then Allah Jalla wa Ala will correct the Prophet, such as has been documented. Also in the chapter, Ibn Abbas reports that the Prophet told him to call Muawiyah. He did so, but Muawiyah was eating, and so did not reply immediately. Ibn Abbas informed the Prophet of this, and the Prophet said, La ashba Allahu batna. May Allah not fill his belly. It appears that Imam Muslim ibn Hajjaj has put this narration in this chapter because he feels that Muawiyah was not worthy to be made dua against him in this way. But this does not have to be the case. It may be that the Prophet did mean this dua because Muawiyah delayed obeying the Prophet. It may also mean that this is a dua that runs off the tongue without the meaning actually being intended, as in Thakalatka ummuk, may your mother be bereaved of you. This is a dua whose meaning is not intended. These are words which run off the tongue to emphasize a great matter. The next chapter, about the two-faced person. This narration has actually preceded, but it is in this chapter as well. From Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, تَجِدُونَ مِنْ شَرِّ النَّاسِ ذَا الْوَجْهَيْنِ الَّذِي يَأْتِي هَؤُلَاءِ بِوَجْهٍ وَهَؤُلَاءِ بِوَجْهٍ. From the most evil of people are the two-faced ones, those types who come to a certain group of people with one type of face, but another group of people with another type of face. This is the characteristic of the munafiqeen, of course. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ قَالُوا إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ إِنَّمَا كُنَّا مُسْتَهْزِئِينَ. When they meet the believers, they say, we believe, but when they are alone with their fellow munafiqeen, the shayateen, they say, we are with you, we were only mocking them. So you see, their outside is not the same as their inside. Whereas a true mu'min, his outside and his inside are the same. He is completely transparent. The next chapter about telling lies and where lying is permissible. From Humayd ibn Abdurrahman ibn Auf, he reports that his mother Kulthum, the daughter of Uqbah ibn Abi Mu'ayt, who was amongst the first of the emigrants pledging allegiance to the Prophet, she heard the Prophet say, لَيْسَ الْكَذَّابُ الَّذِي يُصْلِحُ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَيَقُولُ خَيْرًا وَيَنْمِي خَيْرًا. The liar is not the one who reconciles and rectifies the affairs of the people. He speaks that which is good, that is, in order to avert a dispute, and he conveys that which is good. And Ibn Shihab says, I did not hear any exemption being granted for lying except in 3 cases: the war, reconciling between people, and a man speaking to his wife, or a woman speaking to her husband. The hadith tells us that lying in order to reconcile between people is not a sin. لَيْسَ الْكَذَّابُ الَّذِي يُصْلِحُ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. So let's say party A and party B are having a dispute, and they're at loggerheads with each other. And you go to party B and you say that party A speaks well of you, whereas in reality that's not the case. You are lying. But you do so in order to soften their hearts and to reconcile between them. The hadith tells us that this is permissible and it is not a lie. However, the scholars have differed about this. Do you plainly and outright lie, or do you use equivocation? So for example, you may say to person B that person A praises you, and what you intend by it is that person A or party A praises you, meaning the Muslimin, and party B is from the Muslimin, because there is no doubt that the Muslimun praise the Muslimin, and they also send salam on each other. Do you not say in your sitting position, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin? So salam be on the righteous servants of Allah. Some scholars said that no, this tawriya is the same as a kadhib, it is the same as a lie, because even though Ibrahim alayhi salam used the tawriya when he said, for example, that tell the king that you are my sister, it does not mean sister as a blood sister, but rather sister in the deen. But this is tawriya, of course, because the king is going to think that she is his blood sister. We are talking about Sarah, his wife. Likewise, when he says, Inni saqim, I am ill. So that's why he did not go and celebrate the shirk celebration. But they say, look at on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Ibrahim a.s. will not grant the shafa'ah to the people to pass judgment. This is the ash-shafa'atul uzma, because of these lies, even though they were not strictly lies. But it will be enough for him to feel ashamed, because it will feel like a lie. In practicality, we say you do not use tawriyah unless there is a pressing need to do so. Because if you get into the habit of using tawriyah, then you will be seen as a liar. We learn from Ibn Shihab that lying is also allowed in a case of war. The Prophet himself did say, Al-harbu khud'a, war is deception. So yes, you're allowed to deceive other people and even use tawriyah, because the point is you need the element of surprise. If your enemy knows your every maneuver, then it matters not how powerful an army you have. The enemies will always take countermeasures. And also you're allowed to play psychological games with the enemies in order to instill fear in them. And the other situation is to reconcile between the husband and the wife. And again, you use tawriyah for this, equivocation, to restore the relationship back to normal. Sometimes lying is permissible to ward off a greater harm. For example, an oppressor wants to kill an innocent person, and that innocent person hides in your home, and the oppressor asks you about his whereabouts, and you simply say, I do not know. That is a lie because you do know. However, this is to ward off a greater harm. So a straight out lie is permissible, but it is better to make a tawriyah, if at all possible. So that should be your first port of call. If not, then a straight out lie in a particular case like that or similar to it would be permissible. What about this? Let's say a person called Amr comes to you and says, was Zayd backbiting me? Now if you tell him the truth that Zayd was backbiting him, then obviously there will be much friction and enmity between Amr and Zayd. And you naturally do not want this. Are you allowed to lie in a situation like this and say, no, Zayd did not backbite you? The answer is yes, because this is from the islah between people. As the Prophet said, لَيْسَ الْكَذَّابُ الَّذِي يُصْلِحُ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَيَقُولُ خَيْرًا وَيَنْمِي خَيْرًا. Of course, if he can use equivocation, then that is better. Is a man allowed to tell his wife that you are the most beloved person to me, even if she is not? So therefore, he would be lying. Well, the answer is yes, because it will create love and affection between them. Let's take the next chapter of An-Namima. From Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said, verily Muhammad ﷺ said, أَلَا أُنَبِّئُكُمْ مَا الْعَضْهِ? Shall I not inform you what al-'adh is? هِيَ النَّمِيمَةُ الْقَالَةُ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. It is the namima, hot gossiping between the people. And he says, وَإِنَّ مُحَمَّدًا صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ يَصْدُقُ حَتَّى يُكْتَبَ صِدِّيقًا وَيَكْذِبُ حَتَّى يُكْتَبَ كَذَّابًا. A man will continue to tell the truth until he is written as a truthful person, and a man will continue to lie until he is written down as a liar. Firstly, notice Ibn Mas'ud mentions the Prophet here by his name. This is not allowed if you are directing your speech to the Prophet, but it is allowed if you're referring to the Prophet as a third person. The Prophet here asks, do you know what al-'adh is? Which we may translate to tale carrying or slandering, or speaking about people in a libelous manner. Originally, al-'adh means cutting, because it cuts off relations between two people due to the tale-bearing. He asks the question, and this is a good teaching technique, to get the students to think about the concept coming up. And we have numerous examples of this, of course. Namima is one of the major sins, as we find in the famous hadith about the Prophet passing by the graves of two people, and he took a branch and planted it on each grave. He was asked, why is this? And he said one of them did not protect himself from urine, and the other one went about spreading namima. So he did that, so hopefully the punishment will be reduced in the grave up until the time when this plant dries out. Namima could be truth or it could be a lie. That's not the point. The point is the intention of the namam is to sow enmity between people. Allah Jalla wa Ala teaches us, وَلَا تُطِعْ كُلَّ حَلَّافٍ مَهِينٍ. Do not obey every lowly person who takes much oath, هَمَّازٍ مَشَّاءٍ بِنَمِيمٍ, a slanderer, walking about, spreading gossip to incite enmity. The problem with backbiters and talebearers of namima is that if one comes to you talking about another person, then you need to know that there is every likelihood that to others he will be talking about you, because that is his nature. There is no honor amongst backbiters, like there is no honor amongst thieves, like there is no honor amongst fornicators. All of these types of people are likely to betray each other, because that is their nature. So if you find yourself involved with someone who speaks about others, and he's the backbiting, hot gossiper type of person, then you need to avoid such people like the plague. That is, if you cannot rectify their situation. Otherwise, not only do you avoid them, but you encourage others to avoid them as well, because you love for your brother what you love for yourself. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ الْمُفْسِدَ مِنَ الْمُصْلِحِ. And Allah knows those who rectify affairs from those who commit corruption. Now, just a quick note with regards to ghiba. As a general rule of thumb, we say that you're not allowed to speak about your brother that which he will hate, except if there is a genuine shar'i need. If somebody, for example, has wronged you and you complain to the judge, or if he's doing wrong, maybe committing a sin, and you complain to the judge so he can intervene, you're going to have to speak about that person negatively, but this is a genuine shar'i need. Or, for example, warning against evil. If somebody is openly advertising to evil, you need to warn against such a person, not to listen to him. Or, for example, he may be dishonest in his business dealing, then you should advise other brothers not to deal with such a person. This would be nasiha. Also, more to do with the men in the chains of narration, certain people from the ruwa are known by certain titles which are somewhat negative, like, for example, Al-A'mash, one with an eye problem, and other than that, because this is how they're known. And we may give a permission to use these titles even though they're negative, but this is for the greater good of knowing who the narrator is, and then we may check the isnad of the narration. Let's take some review questions at this stage. So question number 1, what is ghiba, buhtan and namima? Question number 2, are you allowed to curse even animals? Give the evidence for your answer. Question number 3, when generally can you speak about your brother negatively behind his back? And give some examples to illustrate the point.